Hello everyone and welcome. This is a live television and virtual Citizens Town Hall focusing on the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill. This town hall is organized by Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement YAGA Africa and other civil society organizations in collaboration with Channels Television. This message from the Executive Director of YAGA Africa, Samson Itodo, will perhaps set the premise and the tone for the discussion tonight and the analysis that will come thereafter in the next 2 hours or thereabout. Let's take this message from Samson Itodo.
Good evening, viewers. My name is Samson Itodo, the Executive Director of YAGA Africa. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the National Assembly is considering 2 important pieces of legislation. And this bill sponsored in the National Assembly is geared towards providing a new legal framework for managing public health emergencies in the country. In the Senate, Senator Chukwuka Utazi sponsored the National Health Emergency Bill, while in the House of Representatives, the Honorable Speaker, Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila and Representative Tanko Yusuf Sununu and Honorable Pascal Obi sponsored the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill. These bills make provisions relating to quarantine and the prevention and spread of infectious or dangerous infectious diseases in Nigeria. We at YAGA Africa and our partners reckon that democracy is about participation. When laws are made in the legislature, lawmakers must consult with the people. Citizens' views must be reflected in bills passed by our national and our state houses of assemblies. After all, legislators and elected officials are employees of the people. Therefore, they must listen to the people whenever the people speak. This is why we are hosting this town hall this evening, to give citizens, especially you, the opportunity to make your voice heard on the bills under consideration in the National Assembly. Tonight's town hall will address 3 critical questions. 1. How important are these bills to Nigerians, and do they provide a robust legal framework for managing national health emergencies? Secondly, do the bills safeguard human rights and public health? And lastly, is the process and the timing right? We need to hear your voice on these bills because it affects you and your family. I therefore invite you to participate actively by sending SMS to 0903 800 7744 0903 800 7744, or you can send an email to programs@yaga.org, or simply join the conversation through our Facebook page YAGA or on Twitter. Present at this town hall this evening are critical stakeholders drawn from all walks of life. We are also pleased to have the Governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who doubles as the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, who's joined us this evening for this very, very important conversation. Please reach out to your friends and invite them to watch, and not only watch, but participate in this town hall. This town hall is streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube. I'd like to thank the coalition of civil society organizations that work tirelessly to put this town hall together. Notable amongst them is Girl Child Africa, the Center for Liberty, Amnesty International, and the Nigerian Network of NGOs. Many thanks also to Channels Television for the partnership and support in hosting this town hall. On behalf of all of us, I say welcome to the Citizens Town Hall on the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samson, for that message. So let's get into it. The two chambers of the National Assembly have kickstarted the process of enacting a new legislation that will provide legal backing to the management of infectious diseases and pandemics in the country. But there are facts and fictions around the bill sparking outrage in some quarters. There are two bills, one in the House of Representatives in the lower chamber, and another in the Senate in the upper chamber, the red chambers of the National Assembly. And here are some of the major contentious areas of the National Health Emergency Bill at the Senate. Let me move straight to my screen here, where I basically just put you through some of those areas that we highlighted in the many pages of the draft legislation that is being put forward. One major area of contention here is what they have described as the overbearing powers of the Director General of the NCDC. One area that a lot of people have raised issues in the National Health Emergency Bill. This is a version of the Senate. Another area is a power of arrest without warrant. That's another angle that has been raised, Clause 3, where it says that any person who refuses or fails without reasonable excuse to comply with an order made under subsection 2 or with any direction given by an authorized person or police officer under subsection 9 shall be guilty of an offense and may, without prejudice to any proceedings which may be taken against him, be arrested without warrant. That's an area that a lot of people have picked up. Another one is the issue of property right. The power of the states to be able to take over the property as it deems in the case of an emergency of that situation. That's another area. The area, again, that a lot of people have drawn contention is a right to fair hearing and resumption of guilt. This is another area. Let me flip quickly. Another area is a right to privacy. We'll be delving into some of these areas as we move on into the program. Freedom of movement. That's another one. Another issue is a right to peaceful assembly and association. That's a major issue that will get us talking tonight. Jurisdiction is another one. Clause 68, let me quote that for you. It says, every offense under this bill may be tried by a magistrate court, and that court may, notwithstanding anything in the Criminal Procedure Code, award the full punishment with which the offense is punishable. That's a lot of contention for a lot of people who think that this should be tinkered with. Another one is a power of the minister to amend the schedules. So, the last area for the Senate is the age of a minor as defined by this bill, which says minor means a person who is below the age of 21 years. Is that really? We'll find out when we dissect, because we have lawyers, we have the drafters of this bill who are going to be talking to us. Let's now flip the page. I've just shown you the National Health Emergency Bill, the proposed legislation from the upper chamber. What about the ones in the House of Representatives? If I get more people talking. And one area is a right to personal liberty. There are very similar areas from these bills, which, of course, some of them will get to put together and analyze and break down for your understanding tonight, wherever you may be watching. Another is the right to peaceful assembly and association. Another area is a right to property, similar to what I showed you earlier in the Senate bill. The data privacy is another one. Compulsory vaccination, oh yeah, that's another one that we're going to chew tonight. And excessive and abuse of powers of the DG of NCDC. You can go on and on and on and on about the powers of the DG of the NCDC and how many times his name of the position or the title of the DG of NCDC was mentioned in that bill. And the powers of arrest without warrant, similar thing that you'll find in the Senate bill. Wakes and disposal of corpses. So these are some of the issues that have been raised tonight. So, I dare say, it's a good premise for us to get started, isn't it? Let's get talking, everyone. Let me introduce my guests to you and the panel who are on a virtual space tonight, and of course, some of them who are going to be here in the Lagos studio and our Abuja studios. Let me bring the sponsor of the Senate bill, the National Health Emergency Bill, Senator Chukwuka Utazi from our Abuja studio, and also Honorable Tanko Yusuf Sununu is the co-sponsor of the bill in the House of Representatives. We have Dr. Henry Ewunan, who is the head of advocacy at the Nigerian Medical Association, and of course, Mr. Rotimi, the program manager, Health Reform Foundation of Nigeria from our Abuja studio. Buki Shonibara is also in our Abuja studio. She is the director of the Girl Child Africa. If you look right here, some of my guests are already here. Ms. Ayobe is here. Mr. Oluseyi is here. And of course, some of the guests that we'll be talking to, Osai Ojigo, I can see are there. Thank you so much. We'll be coming to you in a moment. Let's get started. And let me begin with Senator Utazi. Senator Utazi, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let me begin with you. A lot of questions have been raised about the bill which you brought up. First and foremost, the question about the portion of the version of your bill that you proposed and the version in the House of Representatives, people think that there is a lot of similarities.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, my friend, for having me on this program to discuss a very, very important bill that has a lot to do with the public health emergency, which COVID-19 has brought to for Nigerians here. I want to say yes, in the issue about similarity, there is nothing, nothing to worry about similarities. We are addressing the same issue. The same issue the two bills are addressing is the issue of public health emergency, which COVID-19 has brought to Nigeria and all parts of the world. So that is the reason why you have similarities in it. But the most important issue is, has this bill addressed the issue that we should be looking at? That's the most important thing, and it has done so. And I'm also happy that this bill, which were introduced with other of my colleagues as co-sponsors, have elicited public interest and awareness. And we are all here trying to deliberate on it and find solution to the issue of making sure that anytime we have a pandemic, there will be a legal framework in place to address such issues. That's the essence of what I set out doing. And I feel that already, like we have been doing, since I came with the mention of that bill the first time, the first reading in the Senate, we have had a lot of interest. The people I informed already with draft bills to make input into the bill. Some of them didn't come up on time. They thought that they had the whole time in the whole world to continue waiting. But when they heard about that, that the bill was done, the first reading, those people started coming. And then I have been getting a lot of inputs from that. And then we have had a lot of sessions with the NMA. We have the Nigerian Medical Association in a forum where the EU ROLAC invited us for a discussion on this bill. And the civil society were also in that setup where we had that meeting. We had people from all walks of life, interested parties, in the stakeholders in the health industry. All of them were there. And we have discussed this extensively, to the extent that even the bill I have in the first that done the first reading is no longer wearing the same look because of the inputs, And I want the public to understand one thing: making a proposition of a bill in the National Assembly does not mean that a law has already been made. It's a proposition. Once you put the proposition, interested parties will come in. And we will tinker with it. We will tinker with this bill. Everybody will be coming with his input. What we are having this evening here is almost like having a public hearing, you know, before the public hearing. You know, that's the opportunity.
Yeah.
So what I have just done is to provoke discussion.
All right. So,
like
Senator,
I welcome every opinion, informed opinion at that will come into this bill, so that we'll look at it. At the end of the day, what the bill we're having in the National Assembly is a bill that will solve the problem of health emergency in the country.
All right. Senator Otazi, just a moment.
So I'm very happy that many people are, even as I'm discussing now, we have finished with what we did in the national, we have finished with what we did in that meeting we had with the EU ROLAC. Even after that one, another from the NCDC, Ministry of Health, have also come with their input. We are still going to meet on Thursday.
Senator, I'm sure you're wondering. The civil space is very much educated these days, and Nigerians are beginning to ask the right questions from the people who are leading them. And don't be surprised that Nigerians are very much conscious now than perhaps before. I wanted us to lay a very good premise for the conversation. That's why I allowed you the first opportunity to give the background. Let's get other people who are with you there in the studio to get them talking. And we are doing a sort of a general principle conversation, conversation on the general principle. Let me bring in Dr. Henry Ewunonu. Dr. Ewunonu, for you as a professional, because it then comes to the table of the medical practitioners, those who will hold the bill as a tool in their hands when we are in a situation like this. For you, if you make comparison from what you have seen elsewhere, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, Nigerians. Remember that the last time I was here, I said there are few guiding thoughts which the Nigerian Medical Association has been exercising since these bills were presented on the two floors, at the two floors of the National Assembly. One, why this bill? Is it necessary? Two, why the urgency to pass it? Three, why the public outcry? Four, what can be done to assuage the anxieties of the people? We need a strong law. Nigeria needs a strong law to handle health emergencies that will in one way or another curtail liberties of citizens. When the president declared this emergency and there was lockdown, serious legal minds in this country started asking on which premise, which law, especially when one entertainer was arrested and they were saying, under which law will this person be tried? So the existing laws there were lots of lacunae. They were not strong enough. And being who we are, as we express it today, that there could be national guidelines, the president can say this is the way to go, follow NCDC. Some state governors are following themselves, giving counter orders. Therefore, we thank the leadership of the two houses. Senator Otazi here, a very humble man that has said, come together, bring those your ideas. This is, I don't know it all, but we acted because we needed to act. The speaker himself, Rep. Femi Gbajabiamila, we call him an associate doctor. It's like he's a speaker for the health sector. Almost everything he's doing, most of the things he has done so far, interventions are in the health sector. So we thank them for coming at this point in time, more especially by listening to the voice of people. In one of our releases, the Nigerian Medical Association said, we are not embarrassed by the public outcry. Why are we a democracy, after all?
So
we need this law.
Importantly, okay, so that's what I wanted to get off you, Dr. Ewunonu. You agree that there is a need for that law, although there's some people who disagree anyways. All right. So I will allow another because there's some interesting perspective. Some I'll be playing back for you to hear. But let me get Buki Shonibare, Mrs. Shonibare, to get into the conversation. Ms. Shonibare, if you can give us your thoughts on this bill, on the general principle of the bill. What are your thoughts?
So, thank you very much. You asked a question, Seun, when you were laying the background to this conversation. As to whether this bill is actually needed or whether it is necessary at this time. Yes, we need a bill to control, manage, the spread of infectious diseases in Nigeria. And that is based on the background that the Quarantine Act of 1926 that we have, we know that it is archaic and it can no longer serve the interest of Nigerians, especially with current realities. However, for we as civil society organizations, one thing is important for us. We look at any bill, such as this Control of Infectious Diseases Bill, as well as the National Health Emergency Bill. We look at those bills from three main perspectives. First, to what extent does it promote or protect or respect human rights? If any bill will come up, and human rights are going to be violated, we are going to actually raise concerns. And when you do an analysis of this bill, at least in the analysis we've done as civil society organizations, at least 7 fundamental human rights that have been guaranteed in our Constitution is actually being violated by these 2 bills. The second perspective we'll look at it from, aside from the human rights perspective, is also the angle of gender, or the angle of vulnerable groups. To what extent does it protect the rights of vulnerable groups? Women, persons living with disability, and older people, and everyone that we can think of. The third perspective that we look at it is the fact that even when there is going to be derogations of human rights, are those provisions of the bill, are they such that aligns with the principle of necessity? So when those infringements need to be done, is it necessary? 2, is it reasonable? 3, is it proportionate? If those things cannot be assessed when we look at this bill, then it affects not just the intention of the bill or the mischief with which the bill is supposed to solve. It affects the general spirit and the context of that bill. So, to answer your question directly, yes, we need a bill that controls infectious diseases. Is it these bills that we currently have? No. That is why we as civil society organizations are saying that we have specific provisions, clauses in these 2 bills that must be amended.
Okay.
And
so,
if they are not amended, then this bill should not be allowed to pass.
Let me get the program manager of the Health Reform Foundation of Nigeria, Mr. Anurotimi, into the conversation. What are your own views? Anything different from what Ms. Shonibare and Dr. Ewunon have said?
All right. Thank you, Sean, for that. Coming from the health civil society, yes, we need a legal framework to guide and to make provisions for the health system and Nigerian citizens at large when it concerns the issue of infectious diseases. However, is that all we really need? No. Where can we look at the issue from an holistic point of view? We should be able to look at the bill. Does it address the before, the preparation? Do we have to wait and just respond? The issue of infectious disease? What do we need to do before we actually get into the field of saying there's an epidemic or pandemic? Does it actually adequately address or respond to the issue of pandemic even when it is ongoing? Does it build a health system that is resilient and looks into the future, not just about now? Looking at the landscape of health system in Nigeria, we have so many legal frameworks that we are actually not implementing. Have we done an analysis to know why are these laws, why are these bills not actually working, instead of we adding more to it?
All right. So I
One
guess
question I've always asked, I asked when this bill came up. Can the National Assembly or the lawmakers give us the situation analysis that was actually done to identify the gaps that exist and how these bills will actually address the gaps.
All right, madam, just let's take a breather because we need to take our first break on the program. Just, madam, just let's take a breather. Let's take a breather. But when we come back, there is going to be a poser for those who think we need the bill. I think there is another thought that says we really don't need this bill. This, in fact, superfluous according to him, illegal and unconstitutional, and that's going to be the basis of our conversation when we come back from this break, everyone. I will introduce that thought to you when we come back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. You're watching the Control of Infectious Disease Town Hall, organized by Yaga Africa and Channels Television. Thank you so much, everyone. It's a hybrid production. That means that we have virtual audiences you can see right here in my background here. And of course, there are guests here in our Abuja and of course here in our Lagos studio. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. The coronavirus has brought on our laps a lot of dilemma that we're trying to live with and some we're trying to solve. How do we go about this? The Nigerian National Assembly and the lawmakers are looking into proposing a legislation that will solve some of the puzzles that the coronavirus has thrown up in our society today. And so my guests tonight, they're being in our studio, here in Lagos, Abuja studio. But they believe that, the panel there in Abuja believe that there is a need for this bill. Let me get the view of a senior advocate of Nigerian rights activist, Femi Falana. He believes that the proposed infectious disease bill is superfluous, is illegal and unconstitutional. In fact, let me allow you listen to him.
My views on the bill are that the bill is unnecessary, is unwarranted, is superfluous, and unconstitutional, and therefore it should not be passed because it's bound to fail. If it is passed, it's going to be challenged. I think I would like to suggest that the leadership of the National Assembly, the members of the National Assembly should seek sound legal advice so that we do not waste precious resources and energies on a law that is bound to fail or that is likely to be declared null and void.
You heard him. Superfluous, illegal, unnecessary. Those are the words used by Mr. Femi Falana. Let me get our panelists in Abuja studio. Let's begin with Senator Otazi. Mr. Falana believes that it's going to be a waste of the nation's resources to go ahead with this bill. He said there is the NCDC Act of 2018, and this bill that you are proposing is unnecessary. Senator Otazi.
Well, I want to say that there is no going back with this bill. We are already set on a voyage, and all we want is informed input into this bill. There is no better time for any law to come into force. Any time within the pendency of 4 years tenure of the National Assembly is the time to make any law.
So, Senator Otazi, apologies if I may butt in, you're saying you are going ahead, but you heard what he said, that there is an existing law that this is unnecessary. Are you going ahead because you think it's necessary, or you are going ahead because you have started anyways?
Well, I want to say that, Shehu, it is very, very necessary and timely for this bill to come into place, because there are gaps that are existing that we need to fill. You know, we need to have a legal framework to guide our activities. We cannot continue depending on executive orders one after the other. It's totally wrong. This is a democracy. We are here. We are not in a military regime where the executive, we make laws for the people. We have a National Assembly that is in place and sitting. And that's what we want to do. who want to take up our duties and do that job. Today, I want to tell you one thing from this, the gap that exists in law that we want to solve. Number one here is that the people who are the patients that are put in isolation centers, who takes care of their bills? Yesterday, I went on oversight, on scheduled oversight at the Gwagwalada Isolation Center. I was told by doctors on duty there that one indigent patient was in that place. And the doctors literally are paying, buying, taking care of the needs of this patient there. Should that be? That is part of what this bill, this law that we're trying to make, that we have to, if you have this issue, we have an issue of this nature. The government at the federal level, at the state level, at the local government, they should take care of the bill of such persons, which we don't have in place to make sure that things were done. And I also want to say that in pursuing this matter, we don't have to just continue waiting. We have consulted. What we want is to get everybody on board. This is the time, and that's even this program we're having here is part of the effort to bring awareness to the importance of this bill.
Right. So
let everybody who wants to make an input into this bill come over and help and bring your opinion. We'll look at it at the end of the day, and then we'll do it.
All right. So, Senator, just a moment.
The stakeholders that are expected to get involved in this are already involved.
Okay.
And we are discussing.
All right.
There is no way. We have not said that at this point in time that we are the bill as read in the National Assembly is sacrosanct. That is not it. It's still open.
All right.
And between the period of first of all doing the first reading to the third reading and the passage in the National Assembly is open for the society, for the inserted stakeholders to make input.
Senator, let's quickly get the views of other people on the panel. Let me get Dr. Ewunonu quickly, and I'll go around in the room before we move into the next phase of the conversation. Dr. Ewunonu, for Mr. Falana, for example, because we're still discussing the general principles, he said this bill is unnecessary. There is an NCDC bill of Act of 2018. Your view, Mr. Dr. Ewunonu?
First, that had the National Assembly if they decided to proceed as this bill was written, without inputs from anywhere, Nigerian Medical Association will not be part of this process. Perhaps we could have joined senior advocate Femi Falana. I will put it to the learned senior advocate that this bill is very necessary. About 17th day of March 2020, I was listening to the news and I saw Director of Port Health Services going to complain to the Minister of Aviation that VIPs in Nigeria, even members of the National Assembly, are refusing to obey the protocols. They refuse for their temperatures to be checked. They refuse to put down necessary information that facilitates contact tracing. It was then the Minister of Aviation escalated that. And even it was discussed on the floor of the House of Reps. And they said, force these people. The Director of Port Health Services said they were even intimidating them. They said they will manhandle them and even threaten them with sack, which existing law addresses that. So is it not time there is a law to curtail the excesses of the so-called VIP people who brought in this disease and that is even ravaging the country? NCDC Establishment Act 2018 is there. However, why is NCDC Act not having copious provisions that we make for instance, why do we then have Presidential Task Force? If we allow this emergency to be handled by NCDC, the present arrangement is that NCDC DG reports to the Honorable Minister of Health. The present arrangement is that Honorable Minister of Health will pass through the Chief of Staff before seeing the President. If we don't have somebody leading this struggle, somebody who has direct access to the President, do you think we'll make any progress? So these are the reasons based on existential, a study of who we are, what we are, how we have been carrying on. We need to put them into law.
All right. So
the National Assembly initially with the propositions did not get certain aspects right. It has been said that the bill, some aspects were plagiarized. They got it from somewhere. But let me point it out. Remember, this thing started from China. How come big cities in China did not get it? Because of the closed system in China. Today, New Zealand has declared an end to the emergency. When New Zealand enacted their own law, some pundits said, oh, New Zealand was going for a police state. Oh, where they will a state of authoritarianism. But today they have succeeded. Liberties of people.
All right.
Freedom
so, Dr. Ewunonu, let's get
under the law.
Dr. Ewunonu,
however, we need to be protected.
All right.
Public health must be protected.
Dr. Ewunonu, let's get Ms. Shonibare and Mr. Rotimi in the room to get their thoughts also on some of these issues. From what you heard, Ms. Shonibare, okay, Mr. Rotimi is here with us. So, Mr. Rotimi, on this one, okay. You can flip me. All right. So let me get to Ms. Shonibare. On this one, Mr. Falana said it's unnecessary. The senator said they're going ahead with it. Mr. Falana said, look, it's going to be a waste of the resources of the nation. Your views?
Thank you very much. I'll start by saying that with all due respect, Honorable Tazi, Senator Tazi, Nigeria operates a democratic system. And one critical component of a democratic system is the input of the people in governance. And when we say governance in Nigeria, we are referring to the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. So Senator Tazi, when you say that we are going to go ahead, you know, it gives a sense that regardless of the input of the people, one criticality of what we are doing here today is sort of like a virtual public hearing, where we are hearing the input of the people. If at the end of today and at the end of the main public hearing, the people says that this bill should not continue, then we should actually hear the voices of the people and adhere to the voices of the people. Why? Because we operate a democracy. Do I think this bill is necessary? I think we need a bill that addresses infectious diseases. We have a current bill that addresses infectious diseases. The NCDC Act of 2018 is an establishment act. And when you look at it, you know that it is not comprehensive enough to control and manage infectious diseases. We can approach this in two ways. Is either we amend the NCDC Act to contain all of the relevant provisions that are needed for the control of infectious diseases, or if we're having a new bill as is being proposed by the Senate and the House, those new bills should adhere with the interest and the propositions of the people. Human rights must not be abused. All of the interest of medical practitioners that we have here and that have also made input should also be considered in that bill. So whatsoever angle we decide to go, I don't think we should hold a position that whatever is the case, we are still going to go on.
All right.
What we should agree on is the fact that the Quarantine Act of 1926 is archaic. It does not address the current realities of infectious diseases. And since we know that we need a new legal framework that addresses current and modern realities of infectious diseases, we can go about it in two ways. Amend the NCDC Act to make sure it is comprehensive, or we have new bills. And when we are having new bills, it should, with all due respect, contain the voices of the people.
Okay, so let me get the view of Ms. Rotimi on this one. You are pushing for health sector reform in your organization. And with this, from some of those who think that is unnecessary, do you think the existing law, or what area do you think we can tinker with the existing law to ensure that we get something that can protect Nigerians in a case of a pandemic or infectious disease situation?
All right. Thank you, Sean. Now, if you look at the existing legal framework or laws or acts that we have in the country, they are not actually adequate to address health security. Even though we have the National Action Plan for health security, it's a policy. If that policy can actually have a robust act, law, it will be more effective. We have National Health Act, mentioned a little bit about emergencies. Is it enough? No. The NCDC Act, is it robust enough to handle it, to actually curtail or provide the health security? No. So if we look at the reforms that we need in the system, like Buki mentioned earlier on, it's important that we look at what is actually existing and identify the specific gaps. We could actually go in two ways: strengthen the existing legal frameworks, or have a new one that actually addresses health security, not just even health emergency. The senator mentioned issue of finance. Looking at the two bills, none of the two bills actually mention how the bill will be funded. There's still a very huge gap about finance. How do we align the issue of this bill with health insurance? It's still a very huge gap, because if you look into the bills, they were still talking about the client or the patient. We still have to bear the cost. And we already know that the cost of health already, the out-of-pocket expenditure is already high, and it's making people go into poverty the more. So, at this legal framework, is the current bill enough? No. The existing ones that we have, are they actually strong enough? No. So it's either we actually have a comprehensive one health security law or act, or we strengthen the National Health Act, because the National Health Act is also meant to go for an amendment, because we've seen some need for it to be strengthened. Or we look into the NCDC Act, strengthen it, and look into other provisions.
All right. Ms. Rotimi,
we have the NADAC law there already. We have so many ones. So we don't need to go in one way, but we need to be very, very evidence-based in our approach.
All right. Ms. Rotimi, thanks so much for your submissions. Ms. Rotimi is of the Health Reform Foundation of Nigeria. I must sincerely thank you for your thought there. Ms. Buki Shanubara is the Executive Director, Girl Child Africa. Thank you. And Dr. Henry Wunano is the Head of Advocacy at the Nigerian Medical Association. I will not thank Senator Chukwu Utazi just yet, because I will not release him yet on the program, because there are a lot of questions that are coming for you. A lot of questions that are coming right here. So I will plead that you just wait. And we got into another aspect of the conversation. And let me bring in our virtual audience on the program tonight, our virtual participants on the program. I have joining me now Ms. Ayobe. She's a legal practitioner, and also I have Osai Ojigo. She's the country director of Amnesty International, and Mr. Oluseyi Oyebisi, the national coordinator of NNNGO. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming. Interestingly, we thought that we would be able to have the co-sponsor of the proposed Infectious Disease Act in the bill in the House of Representatives, Honorable Yusuf Sununu, because that's the premise in which I wanted us to start, looking at making comparison with the Nigerian, the draft of our own bill by the members of the House of Representatives and what we got in Singapore. A lot of people have said there's been a lot of duplication, or they were lifted from that, especially in section 47, subsection 1. Almost word for word, you will find, let me read it to you. And in the Singapore version, almost word for word, it says, in an outbreak of or a suspected outbreak of any infectious disease in an area, the only one that was left out is the name of the country. So let's get into the conversation. Let's begin with Ms. Ayobe. Ms. Ayobe, it's good to see you tonight. On the legal framework of the bill, as you have studied it, what comes out to you first and foremost on the legality?
I don't know if you can hear me, Sean, but I think that we are kind of putting the cart very far in advance of the horse. You see, you've already had the Nigeria Center for Disease Control Act. You've heard one of your previous participants talking about other gaps in the bill. So, and then the sponsor of the bill, the senator, says, and then the sponsor of the bill, I don't know if you can hear me.
Please go ahead. We can hear you.
then the sponsor of the bill says that there's an emergency and we have to get legislation through quickly. So when you need to get something done quickly, you don't rush out of the stable with your cart in front and pushing your horse behind. You get everything in order before you come out of the stable. So the first thing to do would have been to consult with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control so that they would have been able to identify where are our gaps and where do we need to, what is it that we need to do to fill them? Because otherwise, and then on top of that, not only was there no consultation with the NCDC, but there wasn't even consultation with the fellow, the sister house of the National Assembly. So that instead of coming from a unified position and doing everything together in view of this emergency, I think that the National Assembly had rushed. Everybody wanted to say, I'm the one that did it. And I think that was a mistake which would waste time for the country if it is indeed urgent that we pass it. However, I do agree with those who believe that we should review the existing legislation and that we should come up with either an amendment to the NCDC bill or we have fresh legislation to replace the Quarantine Act. So I don't think that it's, because I'm not one of those who believes in the, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you is a bad phrase. I think the government ought to be here to help us. And we do know that Section 45 of the Constitution accepts that where measures are necessary to guarantee public health, then it is possible to derogate from some of the rights guaranteed under the Constitution. So I don't think it's enough to simply just say, oh, it's anti-constitutional, it's anti-constitutional. It does not necessarily abide by the provisions of Chapter 4 of the Constitution. But that's what Chapter 4 envisages, that there are certain circumstances where it would not be possible to abide by those provisions. So I think that we need to, that there should be a little bit of stepping back. I agree, certainly for example, when people talk about freedom of movement, yes, of course, if you have an infectious disease, then I want to be able to, you should not be able to move around infecting everybody. And I think that to say that it would be contrary to fundamental rights as guaranteed by the Constitution, merely on that ground, doesn't really answer the question, because we don't all want to be infected with
Ms. Obey, apologies if I may butt in. Ms. Obey, in law, when you have a duplication of a law, what does this mean? What is the implication? Because there is a major issue Mr. Falana has raised, that there is going to be a duplication. It's going to be a waste of effort that is unconstitutional, is illegal. What is the implication in law for this?
Well, I've dealt with the issue of unconstitutionality. As to the issue of duplication, the standard provision of the law is that the latter legislation is what takes precedence. So if any provisions in the bills proposed by the National Assembly now are duplicated or are duplications of the NCDC bill, then it is the latter law that will take precedence. And as for I don't think we should just have a knee-jerk reaction that because it was in Singapore, it automatically becomes illegal. We need to look at our own circumstances and to decide what is appropriate for us. Right. I think that if we are duplicating, what we end up doing is that we end up wasting time. And that's why I think that the prior steps that should have been taken were to have done this consultation. It's not good enough to come back and say, we are now doing public consultation, and then on the top of it say, we are going on when there's no going back. I don't think it does not compute.
All right. So let me bring in the Director General of the Amnesty International, and I'd like you, Mr. Ogigo, to pick on the issues of where the contention over the overbearing powers of the Director General because some are of the view that if people don't think that the DG of NCDC deserve this power, who then does?
Thank you very much, Sheung, and for raising that very critical issue. It's one of the reasons why Amnesty International actually opposes the passage of this bill. It actually presents a very dangerous precedent. If you look at the way in which we've been trying to manage how public office holders actually perform their actions and how they are guided by principles of rule of law, fairness, equality, it should raise a lot of concern. And we are seeing that under the pretext of COVID or emergency laws, as this one has emerged, that overreaching power seems to be the order of the day, and we need to resist it, because once the law is passed, then it's going to be a lot harder to manage it. And going further, if we look at the antecedents within Nigerian society in terms of when we've had situations of people who were placed in positions of power, we need to make sure we can check those powers and that those powers are open to review. The current wording of the provisions in the bill means that this DG is almost unquestionable, and that is a dangerous precedent to have. Furthermore, it means that they can go beyond even what is permissible under international law in terms of when a law needs to, on the basis of public health, should limit certain rights. It goes even beyond that. If you look at the case of arresting and forcibly quarantining people, you'll find that when such an order is made, you cannot even bring it to court for review. You cannot challenge the powers of the DG, which means that even your right to a remedy, which is provided under the Constitution and is your right under international human rights law, ceases to exist. No human being and no institution should have so much powers that it means that the majority of people under which its implementation would affect.
All right. So quickly, Ms. Ojigo, so apologies if I'm aborting. You have raised issues about the wording, and you're also talking about the passing. Clarify for us, from the point of view of Amnesty International, are you saying that this bill should die, or you're saying that it should be rewarded?
We believe the bill, as is currently constituted, should not stand. We require a complete overhaul because the basis on which it started on is already wrong. So anything we're adding on is just like a plaster. Meanwhile, we need to uproot it completely and address it from the root causes. And any bill that should be developed in response to dealing with the current pandemic should also take into cognizance an holistic overhauling of the health sector as it is. I'm glad the senator mentioned the issue of funding and financing. That needs to be clearly enunciated in any bill that is coming out, because for so long, Nigerians have not had access to adequate healthcare, which Nigeria, as a country with the kind of resources we have, should be able to provide the right to health to every Nigerian citizen.
All right, so let me get Mr. Oluseyi into the conversation now. There is a portion of the property right, but again, for some people who believe that this is not a bill, that if you say that this bill was copied from Singapore, that means it does exist in other climes. Ours should not be different. So why the outcry?
So thank you very much, Sheung. Can you please hear me so I can confirm that you can hear me?
Go ahead, please. I can hear you.
All right, excellent. So we're not saying we do not want a legal framework. I think the conversation so far has established that. What the conversation is tilting towards now is that there are some sections of this proposed bill that negates fundamental freedoms and rights. So we want to kill a rat, but instead of killing that rat, we have looked for a big bulldozer to do that. So the laws are, as we have it now, they are not proportional to the problems that we want to solve. For instance, we're looking at a section that says that the Director General can have access to documents and actually make copies of those documents. And that, the actions of the Director General supersedes any other action or any other law that exists on rights to privacy.
So what would you suggest? What would you suggest as an alternative for that portion? If a producer can put on that portion of the overbearing powers of the Director General, one of the contentious area. But Mr. Oluseyi, for you, one of the areas is that, except as otherwise provided by this bill, the Director General of Nigeria Center of Disease Control shall, subject to any general or special directions of the minister, be responsible for the administration of bill. It does give the DG an overall power. So if you're saying that there is an overbearing nature or portioning of the powers to the DG, who then should have the power, if not the DG of the agency?
So we're saying, yes, the DG can have its powers in terms of management and implementation of the bill. But we want a bill that speaks to our issues and our realities. For instance, there are a lot of lessons we need to learn as we are within COVID now, and there are a lot of emerging trends that we're also seeing. So we're saying that if the DG would implement, let's not give the DG too much of powers. And if the DG would have power, let there be an oversight over such powers, such that citizens are able to appeal. A section of the bill says that citizens would have to appeal to the minister, and the minister has the final right. No, that should not work in a democracy. We're saying that after that, citizens should be able to appeal to a competent court that has the right jurisdiction for that. So our thinking is that, one, for us as Nigerian Network of NGOs, we need a bill that understands all the lessons that we've learned from this pandemic, and that is able to capture issues around social protection, that is also able to capture issues around how do we protect the vulnerable.
All right.
Plus also addressing many of the challenges that we are seeing now.
All right. So we'll take a break, but when we come back, there seems to be one area that a lot of Nigerians will remember vividly. You remember that there are cases of those who tested positive and ran away from isolation center. That's one. During the lockdown, how difficult was it also to get some people to stay at home? In India, you saw pictures and videos of police forcing people to stay at home. Well, we discussed, plus some of the ones you saw in Spain and Italy. So if you're raising issues on some of these, how can we achieve a better legislation in Nigeria? That's the reason why we're having this town hall anyways. We'll be right back, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us on the Control of Infectious Disease Bill, Citizens Town Hall, for you ahead of well, would I call it another town hall or public hearing? That will happen on Wednesday. But this is the citizen version of that. So we get talking, everyone. Don't forget, you can be part of the conversation. Hashtag infectious diseases bill. Some of your questions are coming right in. And at some point in the program where we get questions to be answered, that's why we have Senator Utazi still with us on the program. And let's get back to our conversation and the participants that are getting their views on. Mr. Jigo of the Amnesty International, Ms. Obeid also there for us, a lawyer, and Mr. Oluseyi is the director of NNGO. And in our Abuja studio, of course, Senator Utazi is still with us, and Professor Unakwe Abugu is a professor of medical law at the University of Abuja. Thank you for coming. Esther Uzoma is the executive director of Proactive Gender Initiative, and Dr. Abanida Emmanuel, a retired director at the National Primary Health Care Development Agency. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we should begin with Professor Abugu. For you, Professor Abugu, vaccination, that's one area that caught a lot of people's attention, that people could be forced to be vaccinated. Is it right? Is it procedural for people to be forced to have a vaccine?
Thank you, Sheung, for having me here, and thank you, my colleagues, other discussants. Well, the issue of vaccination has a very, very long history. But what we know from development of medical science and human rights, international human rights, there can never be, or there is no law that provides for compulsory medical treatment. The law is that every person, every individual has an autonomous right and a right to self-determination to determine what happens to his body or his spirit. For you to touch somebody, you need to have his consent. For you to treat somebody, you need to have his consent. And everybody has a right to decline the suggestion of any medical treatment, no matter how foolish he is, no matter how beneficial that medical treatment may be to him, and no matter how innocuous, and no matter how important or foolish his decision may be. Therefore, the issue of vaccination is an extension of the right to reject or to accept medical treatment by any citizen of adult age and capacity. And so there is no law anywhere in the world. I just checked recently that by 25th March this year, UK promulgated the Coronavirus Act, and still they did not make vaccination compulsory. I've checked the law in France, I've checked the law in the United States. There is no such law, because the law on the autonomy of the human person and the right to self-determination is an international human rights law, and it is covered both by the Declaration of World Medical Association. It is also covered even by National Health Act. It is covered by common law of medical rights of patients. So the issue of vaccination to be compulsory, no. What obtains is that if the government wants a healthy population or majority of the population to accede to vaccination, they go through appeal to voluntary yielding to vaccination by carrying out widespread campaign, by making vaccine to be free of charge.
So, Professor Abugu,
the benefit of.
So Professor Abugu, so apologies. I wanted to show our viewers again that portion of the compulsory vaccination is in the Infectious Diseases Bill of the House of Representatives. That portion is the clause 47. Let me read it out so that I can get a view of the other discussants. It says, in an outbreak or a suspected outbreak of any infectious diseases in any area in Nigeria, the Director General may by order direct any person or class of person not protected or vaccinated against the disease or undergo vaccination or other prophylaxis within such period as may be specified in the order. Another clause, clause 49, says, where there is a valid medical reason, the Director General or any officer of the center who is designated by the Director General for the purpose may grant a postponement of or exemption from any vaccination required under this part as it thinks fit. Dr. Abaninda, is this strange to you, this portion, the wording of this portion of the proposed bill?
Thank you very much, Sheung. It's not strange to me because I think I've been involved in this conversation about vaccination for some time now, that ordinarily, by nature of what I do primarily when I was still in government, I would have loved that everybody is asked to be vaccinated. But it's not about my personal view now, but we are talking about what is there as rights of the individuals, as right of human beings to have their say in what they take in. Both the National Health Act and the various conventions and laws in the world have, none of them have ever supported any compulsion where you want to vaccinate. We know the benefit of vaccination. And again, when you are dealing with a multicultural society where there are various religious views and various cultural views, one has to be very careful. As a matter of fact, when we are reviewing Section 46, Section 43, 7 to Section 40 to Section 53 of the proposed Control of Infectious Disease Bill, we just found out that perhaps maybe the only section that could stand out, Section 47, Section 48, 49, 50 to 53, they still all worked around the issue of compulsion when you have to give vaccine. What we advocate for is that you should educate the public, educate the mothers, the parents, educate everybody so that they push for the vaccination, not that you pull them for the vaccination. In other words, they make it voluntary acceptance on their own to say, I want to get vaccinated. And this is possible. Let me just say that there are about 9 to 11 steps that are taken to ensure that the citizens voluntarily agree to get vaccinated, not necessarily to be forced. When you are forcing them, we have entered another millennium, we have entered another era where there are a lot of religious altruistic people that
Dr.
believe
Emmanuel,
that when you are now forcing people to vaccinate, you are introducing so many other things there. So I do not believe that you should force people to vaccinate.
So clarify for us, you think this is draconian? Is that what you're trying to say?
You are really making it difficult for me, but if I should say yes or no, I will say yes. Because you shouldn't force people to vaccinate. But you want to appeal to them to make vaccine to be so beautiful to them that they want to, on their own, come back to take it.
Right.
Don't force people to vaccinate.
I've
been in vaccination period something for over 20 years now, and we don't want people to force to vaccinate.
All right, let me get Ms. Esther Uzoma here. What are your views on this one, based on the wordings of this and the issues of vaccination, and what is obtainable also elsewhere around the world?
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Well, before we can venture into the very treacherous waters of vaccination, what are we dealing with? Do we have indigenous thoughts on this disease? What exactly is COVID-19? Hello? Because vaccination suggests taking a piece of that very same disease and injecting the body with it. So, where are our scientists? What have they? Are we still depending on who? World Health Organization? What exactly are we dealing with? What indigenous thoughts? Where are our professors? Where are our virologists? The world has changed. This planet has changed until we evolve indigenous thoughts as to what exactly we are dealing with. Let's not venture into vaccination. Let us even not venture to legislate. How do you legislate what you don't know? How? Does it make sense? How do we begin? Because everything we know about, we had, COVID, Wuhan, COVID, who? COVID, Italy, COVID, America. And then suddenly, COVID, Nigeria, shut down. We don't know what it is at this time and age.
Is it that we don't know?
What are we going to vaccinate, really? Let's understand. How do I explain to my child what COVID is?
Is it that we don't know?
That something came.
Just a moment.
People say, well,
just a moment, madam. Is it that we don't know, or we're trying to resolve the puzzles around the COVID-19?
First, like the DG said, let's know what we're dealing with. Look at that law. It made quite some provisions about burial, about food, about drinks. And we now agreed that dead bodies, people who die from the infection, they can also pass it to the earth, and the earth will now, get it to the food we eat. Hello? What are we saying? Are we saying that the food we buy from the market, so, it's not about, jumping towards forced vaccination. I won't even, pleasure that argument, because the courts have said, remember, when Mr. Ojo was brought to court, he said he's hypertensive, that he should be granted bail. Prosecution argued that, that's the Nigerian prison is equipped to handle your health. There's no science to, hypertension. The man said, I take freshly squeezed abo from Oshobo in Osun State. Do you know that was the argument that granted him? The court said, no. You cannot compel him to take the medicine from the prison. He says he takes freshly squeezed abo from where? Oshobo. The court said release him on bail. He has to be alive to face trial. So this is the decision, this is the jurisprudence the court brings to bear on the choice of medication. That one is granted.
So for you, Ms. Uzoma, just for you, because I need to take some of the views of the viewers, some of them who have sent to us their videos. Give me an understanding in one sentence quickly. The effort of the National Assembly, because on Wednesday there will be a public hearing. Are you saying that the venture into this legislation is a futile one?
I'm saying we cannot legislate what we don't know. If we must legislate from a position of strength, and like the DG said, we are still in the middle of a crisis.
All right. So for you, is a wrong timing? For you, it's a matter of timing. All right. Of course. Okay. So let me get the views of. We asked you to send questions. We asked you to get your views to us. I'll take 2 of those recorded views. And Senator Otazi is still in our Abuja studio, and we get him to respond to some of these thoughts that have been shared earlier. Get Tafa and some other views that have sent them their videos to us.
YAGA Africa for the opportunity to contribute to the Control of Infectious Disease Bill 2020. My name is Dr. Tefa Abraham, and I'm an economist. I would like to contribute in the aspect of the role of information sharing and the management of infectious disease. The bill adequately recognizes the role of information sharing, but rather than put the power to have access to patient information on the institution, the bill is in the 8th clause, in clause 8, puts that power on the Director General. The bill is structured into 81 clauses and 3 schedules. Clause 8 of the bill, section 1, subsection A, provides that the Director General, permit me to paraphrase, the Director General, for the purpose of managing, curtailing treatment, anything relating to infectious disease, will have access, will require health professionals to provide to the Director General patient information as may be required. So my contribution is, rather than put that power on the Director General of the NCDC only, it should be put rather on the institution. In this age of data and information science, data sharing goes a long way in fixing any solution. But the power to share data must be based on institutions and not on the power of persons alone. Thank you very much.
I'm Chukuma Okewa, the Executive Director of Link Network. The sweet passage on the control of the infectious diseases bill and the perceived infringement on the fundamental human rights of Nigerian citizens has left some of us with panic and suspicion.
Pending before the National Assembly is a vitiation and erosion of all those fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
All right, you see there some of the views that you have sent to us. Let me take 1 or 2 of your questions. This one is from Mike Inwaonu. He's saying, if our lawmakers care about health of Nigerians, why are they insisting on going ahead with the renovation of National Assembly complex when the real emergency now is shortage, isolation, and treatment centers? Which of these issues matters more to Nigerians? The speed with which they are going about this bill is suspicious. No bill in Nigerian history of democracy has been pursued with the kind of speed. Something is fishy. Let's get Senator Otazi to respond to Mike Uwanu's question. They said the speed is fishy. There's something about the speed. Can you respond to that question?
Well, Shegu, I want to say there's nothing to worry about the speed, like using his word, in managing and trying to get this bill through, process it, go for assent, and possibly have an act of National Assembly addressing this particular pandemic that is here with us. So there is nothing. We're not in a haste. The most important thing, like I said earlier, from my colleagues here, I want to say that by saying that we want this bill to continue, that is, we are continuing with it. I'm not doing that with any air of arrogance. Far from that. I'm only saying that there is a need that we want to address. And this need is here with us. We have to do something about it. That's what I'm saying. So, and like I said, this bill, once you introduce a bill in the National Assembly, whether it's an executive bill or a private member's bill, you know, it has to go through a lot of processes. The first reading, second reading, you know, you come back with your debates and talk to the members. If they agree, it will be read the second time and committed to the committee that will now go for public hearing, like the House of Reps is doing theirs from Wednesday, you know, on their own brand of the bill in the House of Reps. After the public will come over there, the members of the National Assembly will sit there and listen out. Their own business there is just to listen, ask the relevant questions. And once they have collated all those issues, they now return back to the plenary and then present the opinions of the people. If the overwhelming interest of the majority of the populace say they don't want this bill, it dies there. It will be voted and it will be voted out. So there is no hard and fast rule about it. And if the people say, go ahead, it will go ahead. We have seen such bills in the past when we had the social media bill. It came on board. And then we went through the slow processes and came back to the floor of the Senate, and it was thrown out. So why are we doing so? We are representatives of the people. We don't arrogate ourselves powers we don't have. Senator, we are employed by the populace, Senator, by the voters. Senator, we are just there at their own expense.
No, Senator, could you react to... Sorry, Senator, if I may put this question quickly in. Could you react to the issue of the vaccination? You've heard experts there and their thought about the issues of vaccination. Are you bothered about what Nigerians view as draconian in the coinage and in the wordings of that portion?
Well, you see, for me, Shehu, this is a proposition. It is not. There's no hard and fast rule about it. There's no finality in that aspect of the clause in that bill. And I want to tell you, you know, where the sponsors of that bill in the House of Reps were concerned about people moving out, traveling out of the country. Already we know, you know, and we are going to handle that already, and that area will be deleted. You know, what it obtains is that if you want to travel out of the country, and from any part of the world where you are traveling to, and you have have an issue, health issue related in that area, like yellow fever, of course, the country you are going to will demand that you have to vaccinate yourself against yellow fever before you travel. So if you don't want to be vaccinated, you don't go there. You stay put. But if you want to travel, you have to. That's what the law should do. And that's what the bill I have is addressing, taking that side. You know, that's what I want to do. So we are not saying that anybody, Nigerians, more have to be forced to take vaccination. No. All right. That is not the part of the thing that National Assembly will be discussing here. So, one will say that you have to travel, your certain rights is going to be certain of your fundamental rights are going to be infringed upon. Why we are saying so? There are certain, if the lives of other people are concerned, your rights have to be derogated. The Constitution provided for such areas where the rights of individuals, in order to accommodate the rights of others, will be derogated. So in such areas, we'll look at it. Yeah. That where we are going to, some of your rights, you are going to surrender some in order to make sure that you accommodate the other members of the society.
Senator, just a moment. Let me get the views of everybody in the room, and it's going to be on this very important matter. I told you before we went on that break about the scenario where people could not obey the simple order of lockdown. People couldn't stay at home for some reasons. And you saw what happened, the picture you saw in India, in Spain, and in Italy, where law enforcement had to beat people or had to use some kind of force to ensure that people stay at home. Let me get the views of my virtual participants tonight. First and foremost, from Ms. Obey, from your own view, Ms. Obey, on this one, what would you suggest, especially because of the Nigerian situation, the peculiarity of our culture here, what could be put into this bill? Because what we are doing right here on this platform, in this program, is to give suggestions on how best we can achieve what is best for Nigeria. So in your view, from my experience in the past months, what areas would you think in that area of enforcement of rules?
Well, so I think that the problem, we don't even have to go to India to see the security agencies maltreating people in the name of enforcing regulations on infectious diseases. We had it right here. In fact, the Human Rights Commission had to bring out the very depressing and sad statistics of people who had been killed while they were under guise of enforcing lockdown orders and so on. So I think that this bill is not going to address the reason why people could not stay at home. And the main reason people could not stay at home is because they have nothing to eat if they don't stay at home. So I think that when it comes to enforcement, I've said it before that there is a trust deficit with the Nigerian government. And if there's a trust deficit, you're not going to, it's one thing, we already heard about the legislators themselves who were refusing to provide the information that was required as a condition for them to enter the country. And that's legislators who are now wanting to pass this type of legislation. We also have many people in Nigeria who don't even believe that the disease is real. So if there's no trust, then the people that are bringing the message to you needs to be above board in the way that they are behaving. I would also say, however, that when it comes to the issue of inoculation, it's one thing for us.
All right, we're losing the our video there. I don't know if okay, Mr. Oluseyi, I don't understand your view on in terms of enforcement of orders and the issue of inoculation of vaccination.
In another country, that you would have to say we're not to be vaccinated before you leave the. Sorry.
All right, we lost you there, Mr. Obi, at some point because of the connection. But at some point, I think you came back. There was the network froze your video output. But if you can hear me now, so you can conclude on the thought, ma'am.
Yeah, what I was saying was that the issue of inoculation or vaccination is for the country into which people want to come to enforce and to say if you are not vaccinated, you can't come in. Or if you're a citizen, you can come in, but you have to be quarantined. The idea of enforcing vaccination and all this, and quite frankly, the whole draconian idea of only the minister's decision is final. I mean, I'm actually disappointed that in a democracy, we have democratically elected legislators trying to oust the jurisdiction of the courts, or to say that the people who are already in the same place are to be the ones who have the final decision. That cannot fly.
All right.
So I think that they have to go back to the beginning. And as the Director General of the NCDC said, you start with the consultation. You don't come out with your draft and then expect people to tell you, dot this I, cross that T. They've gone about it in the wrong way. And quite frankly, it's not going to address the current situation that we are in now.
Okay, so Mr. Ojigo of the Amnesty International, give your views on, for example, a lot of people will think that health emergency is not a normal situation. And in that situation, sometimes, if you look at what is obtainable, I don't know if you've seen the infectious disease bill in the United Kingdom. A lot of people in the United Kingdom have raised issues about what they think is draconian there too. But experts will say, look, in those kind of situations, things are not normal. You need extraordinary measures to be able to get things done.
Yes, thank you, Shehu. And it has been said already by my colleagues earlier. When there's an emergency and when you need to address a situation, public health is one of the grounds when certain rights are actually restricted. But in restricting those rights, there are standards. It needs to be necessary, it needs to be legitimate, it needs to serve a specific purpose. And implementing those restrictions should not lead to further violations. we have various standards that have already been expressed to show that in implementing this restriction, it must be proportional. The current bill, as it stands, would not be proportional. You would find that there's so much criminalization for not complying with a lot of its provisions. That means that it does not put into context the socioeconomic realities of the people it seeks to serve. You mentioned the issue about what happened with trying to enforce the COVID restrictions. They had such issues because we already have a system of harsh police reactions in relation to enforcement in the beginning. So COVID just exacerbated it. And then we have a situation where the poorest of the poor, there are no social security provisions for them. So if you want people to comply with the law, you cannot blame them for failing to do so when you as the state has not provided healthcare, you've not provided social security, you've not provided food, you've not provided this certain environment they need in order for them to comply. It's the same way we ask what was going to happen to street children and to those who live off the streets when they said stay at home. Where are the shelters? So they are already on the streets. So beating them for being on the streets, when you already know that there was a problem of street children, defeats the purpose. So we really need to go back into looking at the holistic interpretation of our constitution, but most importantly, the respect and dignity of the human person.
So, Ms. Ojigo, let me get this clearly. This could probably just a one word or a one sentence response. From the point of view of Amnesty International, there is going to be a public hearing on Wednesday. Do you think that should hold, or you think that this whole process should be jettisoned?
No, I think the public hearing should hold because the legislators need to hear from the public, they need to hear from the representatives of the people, and they need to hear from civil society so that they can clearly see why this bill cannot stand.
So, Mr. Oluseyi, let me get you in and quickly on your views on going forward, because what we are here for is to make things better and give our views on how we can things can be better. So, in that sense, what must be done urgently and in what areas?
I think there are a lot of things that must be done urgently, and I do appreciate the fact that we have an opportunity here to reshape a lot of things. One of those is the need for us to look at a couple of policy options that has to be in place. We need a social protection policy that can help us take care of the vulnerable. We do need also to find legislation around issues of identity management. We need to think around internet affordability and accessibility. Many of us were asked to go work from home, but we do not have the resources to buy the internet, and the internet wasn't, affordable for us. Plus, also, we need to start thinking about meaningful connectivity, where we have access to 4G and we can, be able to buy the mobile phones. Plus, also be able, as much as possible, to connect publicly at schools, at homes, and all of that. We need to start looking also at food security. So I would expect that the lessons we've learned from COVID would help our National Assembly and our representatives to begin to look at important policy options that can ensure that when there's another pandemic, I would listen to government and sit at home. We must also begin to look at job and industrial growth, because what we've seen so far is that post-COVID, there will be lots of job losses. How are we going to ensure that citizens are able to put food on the table and be able to live healthy lives? We've talked about the need for health reforms.
All right.
That is very much important.
So let's take a pause and let's go to our Abuja studio quickly, and perhaps let me get another view from. I'll come back to you, Professor Abugo and Dr. Emmanuel, but let me get the view of Ms. Uzoma once again. From where we stand right now, on Wednesday, I have a feeling that you might be at the public hearing, and you have asked for the basic definition of our situation as a people. At which table or at whose table are you putting this question? Is it at the president table or at the NCDC's table?
Fantastic. Well, I've made a list of all the organizations that have been supported with the people's money. They say they are scientists studying all sorts. All right? Those are the people who should be explaining to us, simple, what is COVID-19? How do we, show it's inconceivable. So I will reel out the names of those people and I will ask them, explain this concept to us so that we can, how do you legislate on what you do not know? Every information we have on COVID is not indigenous. Either we got it from America, World Health Organization, or China. So what are we saying about it? What are we saying? Legislate on what? What you don't know? I won't teach my children such thing. You see, when we make legislations for building, for instance, it's because we understand building to an extent. We do not understand skyscrapers yet. We still need foreigners to come in. That's why buildings are collapsing. So how do you begin to legislate on something that affects the life of people?
All right, Professor.
What you don't understand, that's where we should start from.
So, Professor Abugo, let me...
You were saying, people have devised all sorts of treatments that works for them for COVID.
Let me get Professor Abugo back into the conversation. This is in two areas, Prof. Area of medical and area of law, because we're talking about a legislation. For you, Prof, going into that public hearing tomorrow, for those who think that this bill should die, what would you be saying to them if you're of that opinion? But if you're not, what would you be saying to those who are saying that we need this bill? Mr. Falana said we don't, actually.
Well, thank you, Shehu, for because I really want to put the two sides in perspective. What we want to say, even though many people have said that there's a lacuna in the law relating to control of infectious disease, especially public health emergency. But I am of the opinion that if the Quarantine Act is properly implemented, there's no lacuna in that law. Remember that the Quarantine Act was made in 1926. That particular Quarantine Act has not been implemented, has not been called into action since 1926 to date. The legislators have not told us what is wrong with that act. Remember that Section 4 of the Quarantine Act gave the president the powers to make regulation to regulate any disease which he has declared to be dangerous infectious disease with so much powers. The problem with that act is implementation by the executive. Instead of making the proper regulation under the act, the president made a public announcement and broadcast to Nigerians. And by the following day, that particular broadcast was transformed into COVID-19 regulation 2020. Verbatim, the way the president announced in his broadcast, without any attempt to make a regulation. I want to say that if proper regulation were made, just as we have, remember that the Port Health Services was made under the Quarantine Ship Regulation of 1968, which was made under Section 4 of Quarantine Act. That particular act has about 8 schedules. All these are existing laws made from that particular legislation.
All right.
And now because
so Prof, just a moment, Prof.
Yes.
Apologies, Prof. By the Quarantine Act of this town hall, I will be detaining you for a moment on the program. But I want to sincerely thank Senator Utazi. I think it's good to allow you go right now. You've really tried and get your views on this one. Thank you so much, Senator Utazi, the sponsor of the National Emergency Health Bill. Thank you so much. And Ms. Esther Uzama, thank you also for your thoughts tonight. We'll get in some other views. Professor, Prof, stay with us. Doc, also stay with us. But when we come back, we'll talk more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us, and welcome back. Let's get back into the conversation. I have some fresh faces and voices tonight on the town hall. I have Mr. Ariyo Dare, who has joined the conversation. He's the Executive Director of Center for Liberty, and Mr. Dubem Muhalu, Special Assistant to the Speaker of the House of Representatives on Research and Public Policy. Thank you so much for joining us. Since you are joining us freshly, let me get your views, or perhaps, sorry, did I just say Mr. sorry, apologies, Ms. Mogalu. let me get Mr. Ariyodare's view on the issue of human rights, because that's been a major issue, isn't it? The fact that civil society organization has raised a lot of issues on about human rights and what are being embedded in these proposed legislation. What comes out to you when you first read these proposed legislations?
Well, thank you very much, Sharon, and good evening to our viewers. And I think basically a lot have been said in terms of the human rights violations that have been actually seen in various provisions of this bill. Buki said a lot about it, and some of our other discussants also said much about it. You see, I'm looking at this from a very, from a very big perspective, probably the bigger picture of what is actually unfolding. My worry is that this is a bill that ordinarily should have been a product of several conferences and technical workshops. This is not a bill that can come from cutting corners in order just for you to serve probably some personal interest or whatever interest. Already, the bill is feeding into this conspiracy theory that some people are already, circulating in the social media space, that it's meant to serve the vaccine guys, those who probably want to make money from vaccine. And unfortunately, the National Assembly is doing a bad PR job around the bill in terms of actually getting the consent and the buy-in of Nigerians, simply because there is no way now that you want to go about the issue of vaccines that Nigerians would not want to, one way or the other, look it from a different perspective. However, there is one very important thing that the National Assembly should know at this point. They should remember what happened to the Freedom of Information Act. Just a simple pronouncement in Lagos, I was there that day, when somebody said that I think former governor of Lagos State, Babatunde Raji Fashola, when he said something that they have to domesticate this bill. That's, the law, that's Freedom of Information Act. I can tell you, if the current National Assembly go ahead and pass this bill into law, and it's signed by the president, the governors are not going to operate this bill. And I can tell you that, again, it's going to follow that same trend of domesticating this bill, at the state level. And by the time they get to that aspect, then that's going to be the end of this bill, just as what happened to the Freedom of Information Act. So the only way the National Assembly can actually have a bill that serves the overall interest of Nigerians is to get all Nigerians engaged. And that is one of the reasons why I think IAGA is doing, and others are doing these town halls, for them to understand the importance of getting everybody along. They need all the governors. Because let me tell you something very important, Sheung. This bill usurp, some certain powers of the governors. And like Doctor here rightly said, the professor of medical law rightly said here, if you see the combined power of the emergency power that the president have in the Constitution and the quarantine law, there is nothing that we want to do that we cannot do. Even without this, having this, having this bill that Senator Ostazi says that they are desperate to pass. Now, you are desperate to pass a bill in the middle of a pandemic. And just like the DG NCDC said, that look, why can't this period be a way of harvesting all the concerns and learning from the problems, challenges that we're going to see, so that post-COVID we're able to put in place a bill. Now, you are doing a bill that is not going to end COVID. Nigerians are not interested. This bill is not going to address COVID. And you see, I also understand the frustration of someone like Uloma. Look, about 2,000–3,000 people have overcome COVID. Now, nothing scientific has been done in terms of looking at what these people have taken for them to have become, negative. That's from positive to negative. So no scientific tabulation. So that when you program
Mr.
you want
Dare,
to know maybe hydroxychloroquine comes, at top. You want to know maybe it's black seed. You want to know. So that is exactly what she's talking about, the indigenous.
Yeah, Mr.
Indigenous
Dare,
perspective to it. Let's assume the vaccine will not come.
Yeah. Let's get the view of Mrs. Louis Auta Executive Director of SEDA Foundation, who tonight is a voice for representing people who live with disability. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you tonight on the program, Ms. Auta. For you and your friends, what are your thoughts on this set of legislation, the proposed legislation? Does it represent your voice in any way?
Yeah. When it comes to infectious diseases, persons with disabilities are much more prone and vulnerable. With over 20 million persons with disabilities in Nigeria, it's so sad that our issues were not included in the bill. Inaccessibility to healthcare facilities, no ramps at the hospitals, no sign language interpreters. Persons with hearing impaired find it very difficult to communicate with medical doctors. No privacy, no confidentiality between patients and medical doctors. And now we're talking about a bill that we are strategically excluded. It's so sad.
I mean, if you are proposing any portion, if there is going to be any introduction, for example, Ms. Auta, what area do you think they must immediately consider urgently?
Accessibility to healthcare services, information, communications, and technology. Persons with disabilities can be attended via telemessaging from their homes. And do you know, most of us depend on people to perform our daily tasks, moving around from point A to point B, eating, bathing, and doing other things. What about our caregivers, our family members?
All right.
We really need to do something urgently to include millions of citizens with disabilities in Nigeria.
Let me get Dr. Emmanuel back into the conversation. Dr. Emmanuel, you've heard people's views. You have been in the public service in the health sector for a long time. As a retired officer, public officer, what advice would you give? It's a tough one for the lawmakers, isn't it? For a bill like this that has a lot of public interest.
Well, thank you very much. I think I need to run through quite some few points. Number one is that this is a bill to deal with emergencies, not to deal with the routine services. Number two is that there are bits and pieces of this bill that are already warehoused in some other existing legislature. Number three is it convenient for us to revisit and amend the NCDC bill or to go ahead and operationalize or to enact this bill with the various provisions for amendments? Number four thing I want to point out is that the Quarantine Bill, the Quarantine Act of 1926, is it really contextually useful after almost about 100 years? Because we are dealing with so many things that have changed. Number five is this, that the Control of Infectious Disease Bill is not just talking about COVID-19. COVID-19 happens to be a trigger point. Having said that, my personal view is that, yes, we are in the middle of the COVID, hopefully, and we shouldn't do, we should do everything possible not to distract us from making sure that we have our containment and our mitigation measures for the COVID-19. However, we cannot run away from it. We can start from somewhere. And it is better to be late than never.
All right.
Having said that one, I'm very pleased that at least Senator Utazi did mention before he left that they were not a bit arrogant about the bill. My initial contention is that there was some degrees of legislative arrogancy. And the bill, when he maintained that they are certainly going to do that and go ahead with that.
So Doc, we need to go back
on this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me give Professor Abudu just 30 seconds because he's going to give us a final word on the program. Prof, let's get your medical and legal final word on the program tonight in 20 seconds.
Yeah, thank you very much. My final words is that since the Quarantine Act is not being implemented by the present government, we can still go ahead with the public hearing. But at the public hearing, I'm very sure that so much damage is going to be done to that bill because a lot of human rights implications which the bill has triggered will not survive. For instance, the bill has implication on the jurisdiction of the court. It has implication on arbitrariness. It has implication on confiscation of public property. It has implication on so many areas. And so I know that when that bill passed through the crucible, will come out as people-oriented bill. So, and I'm very happy that the National Assembly is willing, able and capable to listen to the voice of the people because all their powers is driven from the people. And democracy and sovereignty
we're obviously out of time, Prof.
So whatever the people of Nigeria say on Wednesday is going to be the fate of the bill.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof.
Go ahead. We'll be determined at the public hearing.
We need to go now. I will close with the thoughts of Braid Tamutonye. He says, the proposed legislation cannot give arbitrary powers to a single individual in the instant the DG. It is unfortunate and disgraceful. Thank you, everyone, for your thought. The participants on the show tonight, thank you for your thought. And all the virtual guests tonight, thank you for your thought. And for those of you who have been watching from home, thank you for wherever you may be watching. It's a town hall on the Control of Infectious Disease Bill, and we're looking ahead of Wednesday, and your thoughts tonight have been heard. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone. Bye-bye.